This is the Clean Energy Show.
Hello and welcome to episode 33 of the Clean Energy Show. I'm Brian Stockton.
And I'm James Whittingham. Welcome to our podcast. This is a podcast, Brian, where we have a show where we talk about the news in clean energy every week because we are clean energy nerds. We're excited by this. We follow this stuff. And
well, I got to tell you, we've been doing this now for 33 episodes, and I don't know about you, but I'm exhausted.
I can barely get up in the morning.
News that's going on, and you know, I don't even like to say the T word.
What's the T word?
I don't like to say it.
Okay, don't say it then.
I just want the American election to be over. We don't even live in that country.
Brian, what's the T word? I don't understand what the T word is.
I don't want to say it. The T word.
Spell it for me then.
No, it has to do with the American election.
Oh, that T word. Okay. Yeah, that's exhausting.
It's so exhausting. I mean, the amount of news stories piling up. When we began this podcast, it was such a simpler world.
Yes. Oh, wasn't it though?
And now we just can't escape. You know, the intention was never to talk about news events, and but what's going on is it's crazy.
It is crazy. Do you try not to follow this stuff, or how do you deal with it?
I do try. Well, I don't know. I sort of try not to follow it. If anything, I enjoy consuming it through, the late night American comedy, television shows. It's a way to keep informed about it and have a laugh at the same time.
All right. Well, coming up with the show, I'm going to talk a little bit about the throne speech in Canada, which is the first in North America to sort of address stuff. So I just want to get into that a little bit again. I'm going to follow up on some more political things with our friend, because we're coming to you from oil country. We're going to talk a little bit about some of the crazy things because it affects us. I'm really worried about it. And I have family members in the oil industry, so it sort of affects me, and I'm sort of wondering about how people sort of deal with this. We're going to talk about how a steel maker that has a plant 2 miles away from me is going to renewable in the States in one of their plants, which is shocking to me because I don't associate that smokestack over there with anything good, except for jobs, of course. And Boris Johnson, that noted hippie you mentioned last week, he's up to it again. And so the Hummer is coming too. So we'll look at that.
I do want to sort of get to a couple of things that came up, I think, last week. We had a viewer in BC that was wondering about like home charging and stuff.
Oh, yeah. And the big revelation there was that I forgot that not everybody in the world has plug-ins in their parking lot that keep their ice cars alive in the wintertime.
Yeah, we have block heaters, of course, because we need them for our combustion cars. Even in Toronto, they don't have them. It doesn't get cold enough in Toronto to have block heaters, but then, in northern Ontario, they have block heaters. But so in BC, they do have issues trying to electrify the fleet because, things like apartment buildings, they're not typically wired for electrical outlets. So I looked it up, and there is, in fact, a BC Hydro program. Like they have a vehicle incentive. You get a rebate if you buy an electric car. But they also have some rebates for home charging. So if you have a standalone home, you can get up to $350 to put in an EV charger. And apartment buildings and condos are also available. They have another program up to $2,000 per station for apartment buildings or condos. So
okay.
I thought that was pretty interesting.
Rod from BC, look into that. $2,000 you'd have to write. There are templates online. I did not know where to find them, but there are templates for letters to landlords and condo boards and such to help you explain things to them. And these are, well put together and thought out by people who know what they're doing. So I highly recommend that if you can.
And related to that, one thing that seems to come up frequently is the cost of electricity. And we keep saying that Canada has some of the cheapest electricity in the world. So I found the chart that charts it. It looks like Germany has the most expensive electricity in the world at 33 cents per kilowatt hour.
That's all it is?
And
It's 33 cents? That's not bad for the most expensive in the world, considering.
yes, although that is triple what we pay here in Canada. Our average in Canada is 11 cents.
Our average in Canada. I guess you got Quebec, which is a big province geographically and population-wise, and it has lots of hydro, almost 100% hydro. BC's the same way. They have a lot of hydro.
Yeah, and I looked up BC because, again, related to what we were discussing, and for the first bunch of power for your power bill in BC, you only pay 9 cents a kilowatt hour, but after a certain amount, then you pay 13 cents. So they have a two-tiered system. It doesn't depend on time of day. It's just the amount that you use in a month. The first bit is quite cheap at 9 cents a kilowatt hour.
That's what they should do here, but they're so paranoid about ever raising power rates because it's a crown utility here where we live. The government owns the power company.
Yeah, the idea is it encourages you to conserve power if you know that after a certain amount you're going to be paying more for your electricity.
Do you know how much power it is?
No.
I'd be interested to know if it would be like something that you would, as an energy conscious person in a 4-person home, would, like my power bill is about $100 a month, normally before the solar panels went up. And then you get the cost of transmission, which is $25 a month just to pay for the transmission here. So I don't know. It's interesting.
Okay, I Googled it. I looked it up. You pay 8.29 cents per kilowatt hour for the first 1,350. So that is quite generous. Like I only use about 660 kilowatt hours in a month. So I would always pay the lower rate here at my house.
Wow. So that wouldn't, you were talking last week about some, very expensive homes in Regina and where we live that have high energy bills because the power company made a video on that. I guess I would encourage people like that to smarten up.
Yeah, lots of people are pretty wasteful about their electricity. So,
and in Vancouver, a higher percentage of people, because it's a very dense city, coastal city, limited by mountains, they have to have lots of condos and smaller things like that. So, you know what I was looking at today, Brian? Just before I was getting depressed, I was reading something on Twitter about somebody dissing container gardening. I was very hopeful for container gardening because in the far north of Canada, there's not a lot of population, but they have to pay a great deal of money for their stuff, and it comes dead. The vegetables, as you can imagine, trucking it all the way days and days up there to the far north. So I was excited because I saw in the news once container gardening starting to be experimented upon up there, but they were saying it's never going to be, this is like a trucking container with LEDs inside and hydroponics and layers and layers of vegetables and things. But I saw that rooftop stuff that's going on in Quebec where they take a roof of a building, and they said that only 13 shopping malls, typical size shopping malls in Quebec, would be enough to produce all the vegetables for Quebec or in Montreal in one city. So 13 shopping malls in that city, which is the biggest city, the rooftop would just, but they can't grow everything up there. And do you know anything about that? Do they use the heat from the building to actually supplement like the going through the roof?
Yeah, I'll try and find that clip for next week, but there's a CBC documentary that covers, one of these companies that's doing that in Quebec. And part of the idea was if you it's on the top of a warehouse building, you basically build a greenhouse on the top, on the roof of this warehouse building. Right. The idea is that you have to pay less for heat because the building itself is sort of leaking heat up into your greenhouse.
Huh. No, I don't think that would work where we live, where it gets down to minus...
too cold.
Minus too cold. Let's not even talk about that as we approach winter once again this year. Well, good luck to you, Rod in Vancouver. You can get $2,000, and I think this is something we should be doing here. We're kind of the backwoods of the world, and we never do the right thing. But I've been saying this for years that we need policy at City Hall and building codes changed where, well, not building codes, but building bylaws where if you build an apartment building, build level 2 charging, or at least the wiring for it, so it doesn't cost a lot to add it later when you do add it.
Yeah, and either require rooftop solar or require it to be rooftop solar ready, or, require that the roofs be oriented to the south, which is something that some places do require.
Where's that? I'd like to know about that, because I've been advocating that for years. Because when I went shopping for a house here, you couldn't find any. Our city is ass backwards. Our streets are oriented north and south, and so very few streets, very few houses actually face south. I was lucky to find one. You were lucky to find one, but there's actually a small percentage. And I noticed that when they built a new subdivision, Harbor Landing in Regina, that the developers really kind of resisted that, because they were sort of, pushed into doing that by local activists. They said, well, we can't really do that. And they went back and they changed it, and they said, no, we can't do that, at least not as much. So it's so simple, because I know my mother's house, which is an old house, heated up in the wintertime because it faced south without anything special.
And of course, you actually probably don't want all the panels facing south. If you have some facing east and west, then it sort of distributes the amount of power throughout the day. But in a general sense, yeah,
you got to have
solar should be planned for.
If you want the maximum bang for your buck, then you got to have it all south, just to maximize everything, especially in the wintertime. But it's very advantageous to have a little bit, like they say, people use the most electricity in the mornings and the evenings, maybe not in the future world that we're in post-pandemic when we work from home. But you would get up in the morning and the sun's shining in the summertime, and you're turning on your computers and your TVs and your toasters and your coffee makers, and you would get that east sun hitting the solar panels, and then you come home from work, and in an ideal world, say California, which I call an ideal world, except for the burning, all the burning and the shooting. But yeah, that would work out nicely. You wouldn't have to put as much back into the grid. You could make more of your own money. That's the idea.
Yeah.
Yeah, the Tesla power packs, or the Tesla sort of the home charging batteries, have gone up in price, right? Because there's been a run on them recently, and some of the power grids in the States, I've noticed, are saving a lot of money on those suckers already. They can't produce the batteries fast enough.
Yeah, the Tesla Powerwall, they had to increase the price. I think just basically because the demand was too high, yeah.
I also read sort of an analysis by a group of analysts, stock analysts, and people who follow and invest in these things, and they were saying that they really think there's going to be a battery shortage. And this is something that I've always sort of poo-pooed and said, no, well, the Chinese manufacturers always seem to be able to ramp up. They always seem to, because they have a communist government behind them, they can do what is ever necessary to make things happen quickly, and including bringing mines online quickly. So I don't know. I'm a little bit worried about that, because the transition needs batteries, especially for the legacy automakers. Even if Tesla was fine, it still really seems like a battery shortage might be causing these things, don't you think?
Well, I mean, that's what really we learned, I think, at the Tesla Battery Day presentation, was just how many stages are involved, that they know that to meet the demand that they think that they're going to have, they got to go like right back to mining, and it's I think everybody's going to ramp up as quickly as possible, but it probably won't be fast enough.
Okay. Well, coming up later in the show, Brian Stockton, it is the much loved lightning round, and that is where I ask you a series of questions and throw headlines at you from the week's news, and you will have to face the buzzer, and we'll try and throw a skill testing question in there as well. It'll be geographic this week, because I've not prepared properly, but that's coming up later in the show. And we are on YouTube again this week, and we're running out of time on YouTube. I only have 4 minutes left on the YouTube timer, but what do you have left?
16 minutes since we started recording audio.
I know what's wrong. It's going to be a short show this week. I pressed high quality. And because I was having trouble syncing things up, so that's why. So I apologize.
Your card's going to fill up?
I apologize for that. I don't think it's the card. I think it's just I looked at the manual, and it actually said that it shortens the videos. My mistake. I'm sorry.
I did want to talk about noted hippie Boris Johnson, But Shell Oil is going to cut up to 9,000 jobs due to the recent issues, shall we say, with the price of oil.
9,000 jobs. Does that mean that they're taking the resources away from oil and putting it somewhere else, or does it just mean that the oil industry is in trouble, or what are we talking about here?
I didn't know I'd have to actually know anything about this story, James.
You have to. Where's my buzzer? You got a buzzer. Sorry.
Thank you. No, I don't think Shell is particularly forward-thinking in terms of their energy diversification. So they're losing money, so they're going to cut a lot of jobs.
Well, I think that's a sign of the times. So I wanted to talk about Jason Kenney really quickly because I found some interesting stats on India. You remember he was saying that India in 2035 is not going to be able to, because people are generally poor or just trying to make their way into the middle class and claw their way in.
Yeah.
And they're going to need lots of...
So this is Jason Kenney, the Premier of Alberta, Canada's oil sands capital.
Yes, very, very boosting of oil. And this is something that worries me because I don't think that they get what's happening. Of course, this show is all about what's happening in the next 10 years. India is the 5th biggest new car seller in the world right now already. So only 1% of their cars are luxury, which would follow probably the Tesla category. They're expensive, which is 10% in the U.S. But what shocked the heck out of me was that 13% of cars sold in China are luxury cars. I had this prejudice, this wrong way of thinking, this bias that said that everybody in China is just clawing their way into the middle class, and therefore that can't possibly be true. But apparently there are enough people in China to be buying luxury cars.
Yeah, there's a growing middle class, apparently, or upper middle class that can afford those cars. So yeah, a slightly different story for India. They are going to need cheaper cars there, but it's all pretty fascinating.
When Tesla first started selling there, I noticed that people said that a lot of their cars were being used for to be driven around. So they actually have drivers, and they needed a certain size of car, which was the S or the X. Anyway, the leading steelmaker in the U.S. is actually Evraz. And it says in the newspaper article that I read that Evraz, I thought, was a German company. Did you think that? It says they're headquartered in Russia.
I'd forgotten. I wasn't really paying attention. But Evraz, of course, is our local steel company that you made reference to earlier.
And I can smell it sometimes, and I can certainly hear it. Although they are on rough times here, actually, because of the lack of pipelines. They do sort of melt down and recycle and make large diameter pipe. Come to think of it, I used to be very noisy. They got noisier and noisier over the years. And yeah, it's actually gotten quiet. So they actually drop things at 3 a.m. A giant pipe will be dropped onto something and clang.
That's just what I was wondering. So it's like you really just hear giant clanging noises from the steel plant?
Yes, I do. It's not as loud as I described, but you can hear part of the problem is my house. My house is insulated with rigid white insulation, which is not at all soundproof. So I can hear my neighbor fart outside my wall. But because it's not fluffy, yeah.
That's really interesting because you have very thick walls in your house.
Thick walls, but they went with rigid foam insulation. I think they thought it was the best insulation for the buck at the time. 1979, the house was built built as a passive solar house. I would call it sun tempered now.
Yeah, but it just acts as a giant reverberant, I guess. The sound just comes through.
And the pipeline plane is really heard. The attic has normal insulation, so I've got that going for me. I might upgrade the attic insulation if if they come out with some retrofitting grants or something like that. So anyway, they have one of the biggest plants in the States is in Colorado, and it's getting a renewable. Well, the whole plant is getting a makeover, but it's getting a renewable energy makeover with a spanking new 300 megawatt solar power plant, and the solar will offset about 90% of the mill's electricity use. Now, I don't quite understand steel mills, and I know this is an important sort of one of the harder things to make green when we meet our Paris Accords and things like that, and save the world and such for our kids, that things like steel mills, because they actually put coal right into the steel mills and burn that to create fire. But apparently they're getting off of that too. So it's just really encouraging, the fact that something that is that close to home and that much of a problem is actually making an effort, because these guys really don't always want to do that. But a lot of the reason why they did that is economics. It was the cheapest option. And this is what we constantly drill into people, is that it's not necessarily about ethics or doing the right thing anymore. It's about saving money. And you as a business, you have stockholders, shareholders. You want to give them dividends. So you make, do the cheapest thing possible, which is why the Green Revolution is going to take place over the next 10 years as we see it.
No, and I don't know that much about it either, but I know that like producing cement is another huge carbon user. So if both of those industries can green up, that would be amazing.
Yeah, so let's hope so. I know carbon capture is very expensive and things like that. So you wanted to talk about Boris Johnson. I see that he's pledging to power all UK homes with wind by 2030. I had a stat on my phone that I saved this morning from a tweet. And it was that in 2012, just 8 years ago, 40% of the UK electricity came from coal. And now they go for months without using any coal. Like, I'm assuming this is the summertime when they need less energy, but months and months without using any coal at all. So people think the transition takes a long time. No, it does not. Things, when they go fast, they go fast.
And a lot of that is going to be offshore wind. That's something that works really well for the UK. So they're putting up, the gigantic wind turbines out in the sea there. And it will take a lot of money. And there are some skeptics that think they may not be able to make that 2030 deadline. But it is part of their green stimulus as we come out of this pandemic time.
Wind has come a long way in the last 10 years. They've gotten to making these massive, massive wind turbines that would literally, take 100 of the first generation of them in one thing in the ocean. And, I've always been fascinated by this. The curve of electricity is actually fairly flat for electrical generation from the ocean. Unlike on land, where it's more in the daytime and slows down at night. It doesn't seem to here all the time, but it's a pretty flat curve. So you have almost and it is a little higher in the daytime, which is good, but it's fairly flat. So it's almost like a base load if it's offshore. It's not guaranteed, but it throws some batteries into the mix.
Yeah, that's amazing.
So over the same period of time, diesel vehicles have gone from 51% of new sales in the UK to just 17%. So that's a big difference.
Yeah, diesel was huge in Europe and in the UK before, VW and the whole Dieselgate problem.
So yeah, coal is disappearing rapidly. How about those Starlink satellites? Are you hoping for anything here? I know we both signed up for the program.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, they launched another 60 satellites every week or two. They're launching more of those Starlink satellites. It's they're the public beta is supposed to be starting soon. You and I both signed up to be possible beta testers. Who knows if that'll work? But it'd be certainly fun to try that out.
Sure, we'd love to do a broadcast that way. It would be so much fun. You have anything else to say about Boris, noted hippie?
No, I want to move on to JP Morgan Chase. They are the world's largest funder of the fossil fuel industry in terms of banks. They do a lot of financing for the fossil fuel industry. And they have come out and said that they're going to align with the Paris Accord, and they are going to slowly exit the fossil fuel industry.
Wow.
Do you think Jason Kenney read that?
No, I don't think he did. I think, things are happening so rapidly that it's just amazing. Like, we expected a slow burn, but we've been busy. We've been up night and day working on this show. There's so much happening. We might have to go twice a week or something. It's just crazy. And then
it's not. We haven't even been doing this for a year. It's like just barely over half a year.
We might have to go to 2025 and burn the candle on both ends and just concentrate our energies in the first 5 years, because it's just remarkable. And even in the pandemic, like Germany, the only car company in Germany that saw growth last summer was Tesla. Everybody else was in the red.
Yeah, I saw that chart, it was kind of crazy where 20 or 30 car companies all on the, wrong side of the graph, and then Tesla sticking out as the only one growing. So it's crazy what's happening.
The throne speech in Canada, do you have any thoughts on that? Were you disappointed, happy with that? Because many observers wanted a zero EV mandate like they have in California, and I think it's like 20 states now or something. It's growing from 10.
It was more like vague promises, right? I wasn't paying too much attention.
It's interesting that Lion is a bus maker, Lion Electric, and they make school buses primarily
from
in Quebec, and they want to open a plant in the United States. They want to grow really rapidly because half of their sales are to the States already anyway, even though there's other competition down there. So, yeah, part of what they're talking about is investing in electric buses. So I can't wait. And that brings me to our feedback this week. Because our sister city in Saskatchewan, where we live, Saskatoon, got a BYD electric bus. Now, BYD is made by the Chinese company that Warren Buffett famously invested in 2008 or something. Remember that? He was like bullish on them way back then, which is an eternity in the Green Revolution. And they've made like 500,000 electric buses for cities in China. Some cities are 100%. That's the only kind of bus they have is battery electric. At least one city that I know of is in a major city too. So, and one person on the forum in Saskatchewan said, well, why should we buy from China? Isn't there an alternative? Why is our city buying from China? How do you feel about that? I try to, I talked about the TV I bought last week. I didn't look, but I'm sure it's built in China. I'm sure half the electronics in front of me are built in China. My camera, my microphone even. I mean, at what point do we say ethics over price?
Yeah, it's certainly not ideal. The Chinese government is not the most ethical in the world, but obviously over the last couple of decades, manufacturing really has shifted to China. And, for whatever reason, that's often the only choice that you have to buy something. But that was another interesting thing about Tesla Battery Day, because in many ways it, marked the return of American manufacturing, like the fact that there was this American company that was committing to manufacturing. And it's, it's all about batteries and clean tech. But, people forget that, just a few years ago, everyone maybe would have just assumed that, China will take care of all that.
Yeah. But there is Proterra, which is the rival bus company in the United States. And I think Edmonton, city up here in Alberta, bought a bunch of Proterra buses, like 20 of them, which is pretty significant because they're quickly electrifying their fleet, and they built a bus terminal for charging them, and I think they're charging them slowly. No, pardon me. They have overhead charging. They have those little accordion things that come down and hit the top of the bus with high electricity. But they're not charging them along the routes or anything. Like some people say, well, charge them at a bus stop because they have to stop for 10 minutes at certain stops throughout the city, but they're not going to do that. So our sister city got the first electric bus, and some people in our EV community, a few members were actually given a ride on the bus. So I asked them for their impressions. So Russell LePage said, the silence when stopped and lack of rumbling diesel was nice. I found the drivetrain to be quite noisy compared to personal EVs, but I guess it's more of an industrial application. I found that quite interesting because I assumed that they would be quiet, and I've heard the exterior of them be quite quiet when they drive down the street compared to a diesel bus, and I thought that's a great thing for our downtowns to become less noisy if you live in a city that's not New York where they honk constantly, or certain cities in Europe. But he says that beyond that, it will take the drivers a while to get used to the mix of regen and air brakes. So that's I'm sure air brakes feel different than the brakes that we're used to. And then you got to have the mix in there. So yeah, basically, I think like any EV driver, you kind of have to get used to it, but they'll have to just glide and let the regen do the work and just slow down slowly, which is better for the freaking people on the bus, by the way. If there's one thing I hate on a bus, it's when they just hit the brakes and you're jarring around. And so that's a good thing if they can learn to maximize the regen on that.
No, and that's the nice thing about like the streetcars in Toronto or places that have, street level light rail trains. It's just so much more of a pleasant ride. Buses are, even if they're electric, hopefully they'll be quieter, but, they're still going to be, bouncing up and down. And I much prefer, the smooth ride of a streetcar. Or like have you been on the Up Express in Toronto, their new airport train?
It was luxurious.
It's fantastic. Yeah. Like it takes you from the airport to downtown and it's just so pleasant. I just wouldn't want to, even if a car was quicker, and I don't think it is, you just wouldn't want to do it because it's not so pleasant.
Powered by a diesel engine, by the way, but still, it's just too bad. It's too bad they had to do that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I do. I think there's a place for buses, and I wonder what their place is going to be if robo-taxis suddenly take over the world. Because would I rather get into a robo-taxi that costs me $1 or sit at a bus stop, and breathe other people's germs and public masturbation or whatever goes on buses. I don't know. It's been a long time since I've been on a bus, but terrible things happen on buses.
Yeah.
Violence, swearing.
Yeah, no, it's going to be quite the disruption.
Smokers, things like that. I remember when you used to be able to smoke on the bus. Remember they used to have ashtrays when we were kids?
Yeah, and airplanes. People smoked on airplanes.
They used to smoke with a guest up the airplane, No, they didn't. Kids, but they practically did. So he thinks the challenge will be winter, which this is coming from an EV person, because they have electric heat. Some buses actually have fossil fuel heaters on their buses. But then, like last week, I mentioned a bus that had 220 kilometers range, and they said the winter range was 170, which is certainly plenty for a city like this. You can, they need to test them. And Edmonton tested them for a couple of years before they did it in the winter and saw how things were going, and all was well. So,
well, this is a story from a few days ago that Apple is investigating using hydrogen fuel cells to power mobile devices. I don't know how far this is going to go, but apparently they're looking into it where you could have hydrogen-powered laptops.
Oh, come on. Come on.
It's apparently a thing.
No, it's not. Hydrogen is never going to be anything more than a bomb.
I mean, I didn't think so, but it was, a story from a reputable website, so I thought it was worth chatting about.
Well, stay tuned to the Clean Energy Show because we're going to have to cover that in the future because, speaking of Mr. Jason Kenney, the Alberta oil premier, he had a big hydrogen announcement yesterday. Did you see that?
No, I didn't.
Well, he wants to do something with hydrogen. He wants to export it. He wants to manufacture it with natural gas, not with
solar,
which you can do. And the world is moving towards that. If you're going to use hydrogen, it damn well better be green hydrogen and not made with natural gas. But no, he wants to just find a market for it. And he's going to want lots of investment in that, and it's going to be a giant waste of money. There are talking about hydrogen planes, like we mentioned last week, that Airbus is actually looking at prototypes by 2035 to have hydrogen-powered planes. Interesting. We'll see where the battery tech is in 15 years. You never know. Might have a breakthrough, at least for medium-haul flights. And ships, people talk about ships. Ships are stinkers because they burn the worst kind of fuel, and the particulate in there is far worse than any other kind of fuel. They have the dredges of the fuel from the refinery, and they burn whatever. Human bodies, animal fat, leftover dinosaur stuff.
Yeah. So,
that's kind of all disgusting and unpleasant. But I'm not a hydrogen fan. I mean, Nikola was going to be a hydrogen powered semis. That was their thing. They were scoffing at the battery electric stuff, which seems ridiculous now.
Yeah, well, it remains to be seen. I mean, it's a race. I think it's good that people are working on it. Hydrogen's certainly a possibility, but batteries definitely have the lead, that's for sure.
Did you see that GM is there was a report or two out there that GM was trying to get out of that deal now?
The Nikola deal, yeah, things are maybe starting to turn sour on that, but it still remains to be seen.
Well, that's all for me this week. Brian, do you have anything else?
No, that about covers it for me.
Well, then it's time.
The Clean Energy Show Lightning Round.
Yes, it's time for the listener favorite lightning round. A chance for Brian to field questions. Sir, are you ready?
I'm ready.
Okay, I'm going to throw some headlines at you and one skill testing question, if you don't mind. Canada to boost electric buses and charging with $1.5 billion investment.
Yeah, was this part of the throne speech?
Part of the throne speech. Do you care?
Sure. It's yeah. Green energy, that's what we're all about. Let's do it.
Tesla pushes new software update to enable cars to automatically drive through green traffic lights. You, sir, have a Tesla Model 3. Does this affect you?
No, it doesn't affect me yet. And I mean, I don't have the full self-driving package, which you need for this. There is supposed to be a feature I should be getting soon where it might tell me to stop at stoplights and stop signs. But so far, that hasn't come to my car yet.
Have you got the? Because I saw some of these updates are coming to Canada. Have you got the one where it tells you the speed zone from the traffic sign?
No, not quite yet. And I'm waiting for that one because, yeah, there is a few places here in town where the Tesla has the wrong speed limit on their computer. Right. So Tesla always tells you what the speed limit is for wherever you're driving, and it's wrong in a few places. So I'm looking forward to that.
See, when I went for a test drive on Electric Vehicle Day on a Tesla, no, it wasn't a test drive, it was a test ride, on a Tesla Model S like 3 or 4 years ago, we went through a construction zone east of the city, and it knew to slow down. How did it do that, Brian? How did it do that?
No, mine doesn't do that. Construction zones, it still has the regular full speed limit, so that's surprising to me.
Okay. EVs were 15.6% of German car sales in September, with full EVs being 8% and plug-in hybrids being 7.6%. The EV revolution is moving rapidly in Germany and many other countries in Europe. Would you agree?
Yes.
Well, 15.6% is beyond tipping point. We've moved past the inflection point where the S-curve is going to go whoop, straight up. Well, not straight up, but, quickly.
Yeah, and of course, in Norway, it's up to 60% now.
60%.
Electric, yeah.
The U.S. National Park Services have updates and regulations that now allow e-bikes up to 750 watts with exceptions. And by the way, my electric e-bike review of my e-bike is on our channel, and it's sometime around midnight tonight, our time, it will reach 10,000 views.
Wow. Yeah, so it makes sense that I guess they had a rule that electric bikes weren't necessarily allowed in these parks because, they're supposed to be peaceful parks. But e-bikes are so awesome. They're
silent.
Tweaked the regulations. They're silent, so
they don't spin the wheels. They don't dig up ruts or anything. Yeah,
there's always a potential for abuse, I guess, with people going too fast and mowing down pedestrians, but
or a bear,
or mowing down the bears. But by and large,
the faster you go on a mountain bike, the bear is going to not like you, be more scared and startled and want to eat you. That's just a warning. So apparently, the superintendent may open a particular road or trail to Class 1 e-bikes only, which is 25 kilometers an hour by Canadian standards. Mine is a Class 2, which goes up to 32. And by the way, I've sold a lot of those bikes from that review online, and I'm thinking we should just review things from now on. So,
yeah.
I wonder if people do this for a living on YouTube because there's a big demand for it.
Do you have like an affiliate link so you're getting some coin out of this?
No, I should.
You should.
Because that's a big ticket item. They're $1,300 now in Canada. I paid like $1,000.
Yeah,
so.
I mean, the only reason I'm doing this podcast is to get rich, so...
Obviously. Why else would you do it?
Why else?
You got lots of other things you'd be doing on a Wednesday morning. You could be going for a walk. You could be, I don't know, doing brain exercises. We're getting old.
Oh, speaking of which, here's the other news I was going to share. I 2 more compliments on my hat, my Seattle Kraken hat. Yes.
We're at the point where you might buy a second one just to have as a backup.
Yeah, and the guy, one of them was a guy at the hospital, and he was very excited about it.
Really? Why?
Yeah.
Why, though?
Because people are hockey crazy around here.
Ah, okay. This is probably the first time he saw it, and, First time you
yeah.
see something is always exciting. And yeah, well, aren't you a pioneer in the field then?
Yeah, and I just look so good wearing it, I guess.
Sure. But you're not a Kraken fan per se, are you? I mean, you're gonna...
Well, the team doesn't even exist yet, so, you know,
but
who knows?
you got to cheer for them? What are you going to do?
I mean, I think I have to now.
Do you have a team? What's your team?
Hey, let's have an affiliate link for selling Seattle Kraken hats. How about that?
I'm sure we sold thousands of them throughout the show already. They probably can't keep up with the orders. Exactly. What is your team, Brian Stockton? Who do you cheer for? There's something I don't know about you.
Vancouver Canucks. All
really?
The way. Oh, yeah.
So they're going to be the rivals, though. That's going to be the Kraken rivals.
Well,
they're just up the ocean, a canoe trip.
What am I going to do? I don't know.
Oh, there's going to be some conflict in your future. I can see that for sure. So ExxonMobil has been planning to increase annual carbon dioxide emissions by as much as the output of the entire nation of Greece. Depressing news. Have you seen this?
No, I haven't. So unlike other people, they're just going full steam ahead, full coal ahead or something.
I think they're evil, and they have been for some time, and they're not really working on their image.
Yeah, I guess they don't care.
Shell and BP have been working on their image and kind of claim that they might be switching over to other than just hedging their bets. So Tesla acquires a German battery assembly maker line supplying BMW and Mercedes. Do you think this is important?
Well, it's just part of their whole plan. Apparently, this was a company that was on the verge of being shut down. They didn't have enough business or they were losing money or something. So it's just part of Tesla's expansion plans to make sure that they can make enough batteries.
French energy giant Total, that is a oil company, Total, from France, joins BP in projecting an oil demand peak around 2030. That was the latest of the three projections from BP. One is that it's already peaked in 2018 or 2019.
Right. So
energy demand. So go ahead.
They think it's going to be the later 2030.
Yeah. So energy demand increased in all scenarios considered in Total's energy outlook, unlike BP's. That was published on Tuesday, but most of the gains were seen being satisfied by low-carbon power electricity, which will compromise 34 to 40% of final energy demand in 2050, which I think is bullshit, if you don't mind me saying.
Okay.
30 to 50 in 2050? Come on.
It's crazy.
Yeah. Electricity will be at least 80, at least twice that. If not 90, 95, it can be, it needs to be, it'll be the cheapest thing unless you want to throw your money away. In 2050, renewables are going to be cheap. And I'm not talking out of school here. It's a fact that the cost curves are going down and everything's exploding. So, yeah, the Pulstar is disappointed, Brian. Have you noticed that? The Pulstar, which, explain to me what Pulstar is.
They're a subsidiary of the Volvo company, and it's an all-electric brand that is owned by Volvo.
Yes. Well, they've had an EP range much less than promised. It's 233 miles. This is a Pulsar 2, which is a crossover, which is 375 kilometers of EPA range compared to the 275 or 442 kilometers that they had targeted. It's significantly less. This car will cost $70,000 in Canada and only $60,000 in the States, which is actually a pretty small difference between the U.S. and the Canadian price. It's only $10,000. That's less than the Tesla difference, isn't it? But it's probably because it comes from Europe. Yeah,
sometimes we get a bit of a deal here, depending on where the car is from. But it seems like it's a good car. All the reviews have been good. It's just they just don't have the range, and it's got a bigger battery, like the comparable Tesla has a smaller battery and gets like another 100 kilometers range. It's crazy.
So this comes back to Tesla being 3 to 4 years ahead of the competition on efficiency and all their tech in their vehicles, which is too bad in a way because we need these other guys to speed up rapidly. Okay, Tesla Model 3 crushes the Dodge Charger in a one-year review cost of ownership as a police car. And they say under certain conditions, it pays for itself in only a year or two. Can you imagine that? A Tesla as a police car. This is probably for the traffic enforcement where you have to speed up very quickly and chase people down and, get up to speed or beyond speed. So,
no, I think Teslas as a police vehicle, it's a no-brainer. Like, there's just no way a gas car would be as good in any possible way. Like, it's every police department should be going electric for sure.
And they're quiet. You can sneak up on people.
Yeah.
Turn off the artificial noise, which is probably something they can have for police cars.
Yeah.
At least maybe a switch to turn it off, and you can sneak up on the burglars.
No, but just imagine electric is perfect for a police car because it's just kind of driving around and idling all day, but you don't have to have an engine running, and I'm sure there's ample time to charge it. It's absolute no-brainer. More upfront, cheaper in the long run.
And you're often not covering a lot of range in a police car. You're just staying within the city, and some people will drive constantly on the highway, and that's a bit different. But still, I imagine it meets those needs as well, at least for the United States. 60% of new cars are electric, in a milestone for Norway. We already covered that, so I'm going to move on. 20% of Americans have HVAC systems that cost the homeowner an extra $882 annually on average to keep their homes cool, almost 4 times as much as the most efficient similar homes. So this is according to a new study conducted by smart home energy company Sense, who make smart home energy monitors. But here's the surprising findings. The 20% of homes with the highest cooling account for 40% of all cooling consumption in the entire United States. And updating these efficient homes would save a whopping 8% of all U.S. residential electricity just by updating these homes. So you might think energy retrofits are kind of not really appropriate for the States, but when we're talking about southern climates with air conditioning, high air conditioning use, this actually can make a significant difference.
Right. So we often talk about insulation for all of our heating that we need up here in the cold north. But you need insulation for cooling, too, or it's just inefficient, right? Is that what it's saying?
That's what they're saying, 8%. So, yes, it's the building envelope, and it's the systems, and it's the insulation and the way they're designed. So that can save 8%. That's huge.
Yeah, and you have, of course, as we mentioned earlier, this sort of passive solar house that is heavily insulated. So, how do you find it in terms of the winter and the summer?
For a house with almost all of its window square footage facing south, it's amazing. It's like, I actually find it warmer in late January and the first half of February. That seems to be the sweet spot for the sun actually heating through the house. But then by the time it gets to the angle of the summer, which is quite high overhead, it bounces off. And well, it's easy for me to say because we do have cool nights here, right? We have dry, high elevation, sort of cool nights down to 13, 14 degrees Celsius. And it's easy to cool off a house if you take some effort like you and I do to do it. But it probably wouldn't be the same in Ontario where it's moist as heck. And you'd have to run an air conditioner to stay comfortable, to dehumidify and such.
Yeah, but the insulation obviously helps your house stay cool.
Brian, what is the capital of Rhode Island?
Rhode Island City.
I don't know, but I assume that's wrong. Alexa, what's the capital of Rhode Island?
Rhode Island's capital is Providence.
Wow.
Oh, yeah. I actually, I should have known that.
I didn't. I forgot. I don't know. What do I care about Rhode Island? Screw you, Rhode Island.
It's not even our country.
Send me an angry email. And this is the point of the show where I'm going to tell everyone how to get a hold of us. cleanenergyshow@gmail.com. If you're in Rhode Island now and you're angry and you're seething and you're thinking of turning off this podcast, don't. Send me an angry email. cleanenergyshow@gmail.com or on Twitter where you can rant at us. Clean Energy Pod. Clean Energy Pod, one word, on Twitter. We like to hear from you, and we do every week from people, and we really appreciate that because you guys are part of our show. And we're on SpeakPipe if you want to leave us a voice message, which people haven't done in a long time, but it's such a wonderful thing when we have your voice literally on the show. Speakpipe.com/cleanenergyshow. Brian, one more thing. Tesla says that they are going to start activating a new charge port heater, but it's unclear who has it, what vehicles actually have it. Do you have any hope that yours has it?
Yeah, I was wondering about that. Yeah, so Tesla, they tend to add hardware features to cars without really telling anybody. So, I'm very, very curious. It's going to be revealed, I think, with maybe the next software update. But I think there's a chance that my car has the heated port. I'd say it's about 50-50.
When did you get your car?
It arrived in March.
March, 50-50. And that's been a problem for people, the heated charge ports, and when with snow and ice sort of gets on them?
Yeah, sometimes, if there's freezing rain or an ice storm or something, the port gets all frozen up and, can be difficult to plug in and charge. So they just added some kind of a heater, apparently.
That happened to me last year for the first time on my charge port, which is a sort of a little hatch. It's not small. But I imagine in other places, I've read about other Leaf owners having that problem in other parts of Canada. Our weather generally doesn't give us freezing rain too much. And melting snow, it's usually minus 50 or something when it snows and it's dry and powdery. This has been another edition of our wonderful Clean Energy Show, and we'll see you again next week, everyone.
Yeah, see you next week.